I am pregnant. And it is Preston's. 6 words. That is all it took for my younger sister, Bella, to stand up at my engagement dinner and set fire to my life. She placed a manicured hand on her stomach and looked at my fiancé with a sickening sweetness. I waited for the room to explode. I waited for my parents to scream. Instead, they looked relieved. My father, Robert, did not even look at Preston. He leaned back in his chair, locked eyes with me, and delivered the sentence that erased 26 years of loyalty. He said, "Maya, you are the strong one. Bella is weak. She needs him. You will step aside for the sake of this family." He did not ask. He ordered. And he looked at me, the daughter who paid off his debts, the daughter who bought the villa we were sitting in, and told me to hand over my future because my sister was too fragile to face the consequences of her own betrayal. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply reached into my purse and pulled out the velvet box containing the vintage Patek Philippe watch I had bought for Preston. A gift worth $50,000. I set it gently on the table, right next to the untouched roast beef. "Merry Christmas," I said. Then, I turned my back on them and walked toward the door in cold silence. I did not know yet that they would not let me leave. I did not make it to the front door. My father moved faster than I had ever seen him move in his life. He planted himself in the center of the archway, his face flushed not with shame, but with a terrifying indignation. He did not look like a man who had just sanctioned the betrayal of his eldest child. He looked like a man whose property was trying to walk away. He told me I was not leaving. He said they had investors arriving at noon the next day. He demanded I stay, smile, and tell everyone that Preston and I had decided to part ways amicably. I stared at him. I asked if he truly expected me to host the engagement party for my own fiancé and my sister. He spat the words at me. He told me to stop being a curse, and there it was. The truth they had whispered for 26 years, finally screamed out loud. He stepped closer, his eyes wide with a grudge he had nursed for a quarter of a century. He brought up August 14th, 1998, the day I was born. He said he was on his way to sign the Midtown contract, a deal worth $2 million that would have saved the family. But because I decided to come early, his car broke down on the way to the hospital. He missed the meeting. He lost the deal. He lost the company. He pointed a finger at my face and told me I had been a bad omen since my first breath. But Bella? She was born the week he won a settlement lawsuit. She was the lucky charm. He said I owed her this. I stood there, stunned by the absolute absurdity of it. He was blaming an infant for his own business failure. He was justifying the theft of my future because of a flat tire in the 90s. I told him I had paid off his debts. I reminded him I bought the house. I told him I was not a curse. I was the bank. Then my mother, Linda, stepped between us. She did not yell. She dropped her voice to that terrifyingly gentle tone she used when she wanted something. She reached out to touch my arm, and I flinched. She told me to listen to reason. She said I was successful, made of steel, and a survivor. She said if Preston left me, I would cry for a month and then build another company. But then she looked at my sister, who was still sitting at the table, absent-mindedly picking at a grape while wearing my engagement ring. She said Bella was soft. She claimed Bella could not survive the world like I could. She said it was the duty of the strong to feed the weak, and I should not be selfish enough to starve her. It was the logic of a parasite. They did not love me. They just loved that I was strong enough to carry the dead weight of their favorite child. I told them I was done carrying them. I told them I was selling the house because the deed was in my name, and they had 30 days to vacate. I told Preston he was fired. The color drained from my mother's face. The ATM was shutting down. Panic flickered in her eyes, sharp and dangerous. She raised her hands in surrender and told me not to make rash decisions. She walked quickly to the kitchen island and picked up a glass filled with a bright yellow smoothie. She offered it to me like a peace treaty. She said it was just banana and turmeric to calm my nerves. I hesitated. My throat was dry from the adrenaline. She promised there was no mango. She looked me dead in the eye and swore she had rinsed the blender herself. I was shaking. I wanted to believe that, despite the greed and cruelty, my mother would not physically hurt me. I took the glass. I took a long swallow. It took exactly 30 seconds. First, it was just a tickle on my tongue. Then, my ears started to burn. Then, it felt like someone had poured liquid concrete down my throat and let it harden. I dropped the glass. It shattered on the marble floor. I wheezed the word mango. The word barely came out. I clawed at my neck. I gasped for my EpiPen. I stumbled toward the dining room where my bag was. Preston was standing there. He looked at my father and asked if he should call emergency services. My father looked at me. I was on my knees now, gasping for air, my vision blurring at the edges. He looked at his watch. He said if the ambulance came, the neighbors would see the lights, and the police would come inside. He said it would ruin the vibe for the party tomorrow. My mother told them to put me in the pantry. She did not look at me. She just started picking up the pieces of broken glass. She said it was cool in there, and ideally, I would pass out and sleep it off. Worst case, she said. The bad omen finally leaves us. Preston grabbed me by the back of my blazer. I tried to fight, but my body was shutting down. He dragged me across the floor. The last thing I saw before the pantry door slammed shut was my sister, Bella. She was holding my vintage watch up to the light, smiling as she tried it on her own wrist. Then the lock clicked, and the darkness swallowed me whole. I did not die, but I should have. The pantry was pitch black and smelled of stale flour and expensive truffles. My throat was closing up, a slow, suffocating constriction that felt like a fist tightening around my windpipe. I knew I had about 4 minutes before my airway collapsed completely. I crawled across the floor, knocking over cans of caviar and imported olive oil until my hand brushed against a small plastic bottle on the bottom shelf. It was the dog's medication. Liquid diphenhydramine. I did not have the strength to unscrew the child-proof cap. So, I smashed the neck of the bottle against the corner of the shelf. Plastic shards and sticky pink liquid exploded over my hands. I licked it off my fingers. I drank it from the jagged rim of the broken bottle, cutting my lip, swallowing glass and medicine together. It kept the air flowing. A tiny, whistling thread of oxygen that kept me alive in the dark. I lay there for 6 hours. I listened to the sounds of my family upstairs, the heavy footsteps of my father, the muted laughter of the television. They were watching a movie while I lay dying next to the broom. At 4:15 in the morning, the lock clicked. The door creaked open, letting in a slice of kitchen light. Rosa, our housekeeper of 10 years, stood there. She was wearing her nightgown, and she was shaking so hard the keys rattled in her hand. She whispered that she had heard the glass break and waited until my father fell asleep. She pulled me to my feet. She wanted to call the police, but I stopped her. I told her if she called, my father would blame her and call immigration to take her children away. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out my emergency cash clip, $900. I pressed the money into her trembling hand. I told her to leave the back door unlocked and break the handle to make it look like I forced my way out. I told her to run to her sisters in Queens and never come back. Rosa looked at me for 1 second, then nodded. She ran. That was the last time I ever saw her. I slipped out the back door into the cold night air. I did not go to the hospital. Instead, I stumbled across the lawn to the guest house, my sanctuary, my office, and the place where I kept the main server for my event planning company. I locked the door, collapsed onto the sofa, and plugged in my old iPad. I needed evidence, and I did not need to be a hacker to get it. I just needed to be the person who paid the bills. For 5 years, I had paid for the family phone plan. I managed the cloud storage. Years ago, when Bella broke her phone, I gave her my old iPhone and linked it to the family account so she could keep her apps. I never unlinked it. I opened the Photos app. I waited for the sync bar to load. And there it was. The receipt. A video file. Timestamped 8:42 p.m. I pressed play. The video was shaky, vertical, filmed from chest height. It was Preston. The idiot had filmed the cleanup to send to Bella. On the screen, I saw my mother sweeping up the broken glass. I heard my own wheezing. A terrible, wet sound. Then, Preston's voice behind the camera said, "Problem solved. She is in the box, quiet as a mouse." A text message notification popped up on the screen. A screenshot of the text he had sent to Bella along with the video. The caption read, "Do not worry, babe. The jinx is handled. Engagement party is still on." I stared at the screen. My hands were not shaking anymore. This was attempted murder with depraved indifference. It was a Class A felony, and he had uploaded the confession directly to my iPad, but I was not done. I climbed the ladder to the guest house attic, where we stored the old tax boxes. I found the dusty banker's box labeled 1998 business records. I flipped through the yellowed pages until I found August. My father had claimed he missed the contract signing because my birth made him late. He claimed he lost the deal. I found the entry for August 13th, 1998, the day before I was born. There was a withdrawal for $250,000 in cash. The note read personal loan, Robert Norton. He had not missed the meeting. He had embezzled $250,000 from the company account to pay off a gambling debt, and the partners had fired him for cause the next morning. I took a high-resolution photo of the ledger. Then, I opened the IRS website. I downloaded Form 211, the application for award for original information. I filled in my father's name and attached the evidence of unreported income and embezzlement. I hit submit. They wanted to erase me? Fine. I would erase their assets first. They say the best place to hide a knife is inside a bouquet of flowers. 3 days after I escaped the pantry, I went back to the villa. I did not go with the police. I did not go with a lawyer. I went alone, wearing a soft beige cardigan and no makeup. I made sure to look exactly how they wanted to see me. Broken, defeated, and submissive. My mother opened the door. She flinched, half expecting me to scream. I whispered that I was sorry. I told them they were right. I said I had spent 3 days thinking about it, about the contract Dad lost in '98, and about the allergy attack. I said it was me. I admitted I was the bad omen and that I almost ruined Bella's engagement because of my bad energy. My father walked into the hallway. He listened, his chest puffing out as my words fed the starving beast of his ego. Narcissists do not need truth. They just need agreement. I told them I was leaving and moving to Europe. But before I went, I wanted to give Bella a parting gift. I offered to plan the wedding. The Sapphire Gala. I said I would use my connections and waive my fees to make it the wedding of the century. I saw the greed flicker in my father's eyes. He did not see a daughter. He saw a free event planner, and a way to save face with his investors. He grunted and agreed, but warned me to stay out of the photos. For the next 4 weeks, I played the role of the perfect, penitent sister. I booked the 5-star hotel. I ordered the 6-tier cake. I let Bella alter my wedding dress to fit her pregnancy bump, smiling while she tore the silk I had paid for. But while they were picking out hydrangeas, I was building the cage. The problem was, my father was cash poor. He had the lifestyle, but no liquidity. To pay for the vendors, he needed money fast. I told him over breakfast 2 weeks before the wedding that I could pull some strings with my private lenders. I said they could approve a bridge loan for $200,000 to cover the gala, but they needed to consolidate his old liabilities to approve the credit. I slid a thick stack of documents across the marble island. On top was a standard loan application. Buried on page 14, Clause 7b, was a debt acknowledgement and restructuring agreement. It stated clearly that the borrower, Robert Norton, acknowledges the outstanding principal of $250,000 withdrawn from Norton Corporation in August 1998 as a personal liability, hereby secured against the deed of the current residence. I told him it was just standard compliance to clear the audit flags so the cash would hit his account by Friday. He did not read page 14. He did not even look at it. He just saw the promise of a $200,000 injection. He picked up his pen and signed his name. The sound of that pen on paper was louder to me than a gunshot. He had not just signed a loan. He had legally confessed to the embezzlement he had denied for 26 years. He had just handed me the deed to the house. 2 days before the wedding, I walked into the district attorney's office. I walked straight to the desk of District Attorney Marcus Thorne, a man who had tried to prosecute my father for fraud 10 years ago but failed due to lack of evidence. I placed 2 things on his desk. First, the iPad with the video of the attempted murder. Second, the signed debt restructuring agreement, proving the tax fraud and embezzlement. Thorne watched the video in silence. His jaw tightened as he heard my mother's voice talking about letting me die to save the party vibe. He looked up at me and said he could have them picked up tonight for attempted murder in the 1st degree. I told him no. I said if he arrested them tonight, they would spin the story and say I was mentally unstable. I leaned forward. I told him the wedding was Saturday night, with 300 witnesses, the press, and his business partners. I said I wanted him to raid the ballroom at 8 o'clock. I wanted the handcuffs to go on while the cameras were rolling. Thorne looked at the video again, then at me. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. He told me not to be late. The wedding night arrived. The grand ballroom was bathed in sapphire light. 300 guests filled the room, holding champagne flutes that cost more than my first car. I saw my father holding court with his business partners, laughing loudly, acting like the king of the world. I saw the insurance agent who held the policy on the villa, nodding politely as my father bragged about his financial comeback. Bella stood on the stage. She was wearing my dress. The silk had been let out at the waist to accommodate the baby, but the diamonds stitched into the bodice were undeniably mine. She looked radiant, innocent, and completely oblivious to the fact that she was standing on a trapdoor. My mother took the microphone. She looked like royalty. She raised her glass and beamed at the crowd. She spoke about love and sacrifice. She thanked me, her eldest daughter, for graciously stepping aside because I knew that true love could not be forced. She asked me to stand up. The spotlight swung across the room. It found me at the back, near the audiovisual console. I was not wearing the beige bridesmaid dress they had assigned me. I was wearing a blood-red power suit, sharp enough to cut glass. I did not smile. I did not wave. I walked steadily to the microphone stand near the sound booth. The room went quiet. My mother's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered. She expected me to play my part. She expected the submission. I gripped the microphone. I thanked her. I said she was right, that I did step aside. But I told the crowd that I thought everyone should know exactly how she asked me to do it. I turned to the sound technician, a young man I had hired personally, and gave a single nod. I hit enter on the console. The giant LED screens behind the happy couple flickered. The photo of Bella and Preston kissing vanished. In its place, the shaky, vertical video from the kitchen appeared. The sound was deafening. My mother's voice boomed over the speakers, clear and cruel. She said to put me in the pantry, and ideally, I would pass out. Then my father's voice followed, saying if I died, the bad omen would finally leave them. The sound of my own wheezing filled the ballroom. A wet, desperate gasping that made the skin crawl. The crowd went silent. It was not a murmur. It was the silence of a tomb. On the screen, Preston kicked my purse away. In the ballroom, the real Preston dropped his champagne glass. It shattered, echoing the sound on the screen. I picked up the microphone again. I pointed to the stage. I told the crowd that was the groom, and those were the parents of the bride, attempting to murder their daughter to save a party. My mother lunged for the stage, screaming to turn it off, claiming it was fake and created by AI. My father looked at his business partners, his face draining of color. He shouted that I was crazy, that I was the jinx. I told him there was one more thing. I said he did not miss my birth because of a flat tire. He missed it because he was stealing $250,000. I flashed the signed debt restructuring agreement on the screen. The signature was undeniable. The admission of embezzlement was projected 10 feet high. The double doors burst open. It was not the caterers. It was 6 uniformed officers and District Attorney Thorne. The officer shouted for Robert Norton, Linda Norton, and Preston Yates. He announced they were under arrest for attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy, and aggravated assault. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Preston tried to run out the back, but he was tackled by a waiter who was actually an undercover cop. My mother screamed as the cuffs clicked, shouting that after everything she did for this family, I should tell them to stop. I walked up to her. I looked into her eyes, the same eyes that watched me choke. I whispered that I would stop them, but I did not want to make a scene. As the officers dragged them toward the exit, a man in a gray suit stood up from table 4. It was the insurance agent. He raised his voice above the chaos. He told my father that his homeowner's policy had a strict criminal conduct exclusion. He declared the coverage void immediately. He announced that the firm was seizing the property assets to cover the liability of the wedding cancellation and the investigation costs. My father stopped fighting the cuffs. He slumped. He realized the life estate clause, the only thing keeping a roof over his head, was shattered. He was not just going to prison. He was going to prison homeless. The police cars drove away in a convoy of red and blue lights. The guests scrambled to leave, muttering in horror, leaving half-eaten cake and spilled wine on the tables. Bella was left standing on the curb. She was not arrested. Being a beneficiary of cruelty is not a crime, only a moral failing. But she was alone. She was wearing a stolen dress. Her fiancé was in a holding cell, and her parents were facing 20 years. I drove my car to the villa. I met the locksmith I had scheduled. We drilled out every cylinder in the house. We changed the codes on the gates. An hour later, the intercom buzzed. It was Bella. She was sobbing. She banged on the heavy iron gate. She begged me to let her in. She said she had nowhere to go and reminded me she was pregnant. I pressed the talk button. My voice was calm. I told her to go to the father. Then I corrected myself, remembering he was in jail. I told her to try the homeless shelter on 5th Street. I told her they serve mango juice on Tuesdays. I turned off the intercom. I walked into the kitchen, picked up the blender my mother had used to poison me, and dropped it into the trash. Then I went to sleep. It has been 6 months since the Sapphire wedding. The fallout was absolute. The legal system moves slowly, but when you hand them a signed confession and a video of attempted murder, the gears grind with terrifying efficiency. The judge sentenced my father, Robert Norton, to 15 years in state prison for embezzlement, tax fraud, and attempted murder. My mother received 12 years as a co-conspirator. Preston, ever the coward, took a plea deal for 5 years in exchange for testifying against them. The court was thorough. They ordered restitution of $142,000 to be paid to me from the liquidation of their remaining assets. The community did not rally behind them. The church they attended for 20 years excommunicated them quietly to avoid the scandal. My former neighbors sent me letters of apology, claiming they had no idea, though I suspect they just did not want to know. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter from the correctional facility upstate. It was from my mother. The handwriting was shaky. She did not apologize. Instead, she wrote about how hard the prison mattress was. She wrote that she did what she thought was best for the family's survival. She ended the letter by asking if I could deposit $50 into her commissary account so she could buy face cream. She signed it. Mom. I did not burn the letter. I did not cry over it. I simply dropped it into the recycling bin next to the junk mail. I did not reply. Indifference is a far greater punishment than hate. Hate implies I still care enough to feel something. Indifference means they no longer exist. I sold the villa. I could not live in a house with a pantry that smelled like fear. I used the money, every cent of the equity, to buy a small vineyard in Lake Como. It is quiet here. The air smells of grapes and rain, not old money and secrets. I am not alone. Last Sunday, I hosted a dinner party. There were no blood relatives at the table. Just my business partner, Sarah, who sat by my hospital bed years ago when I had appendicitis, and Marcus, the district attorney, who has become a close friend. And Rosa, I found her in Queens and hired her to manage the estate here. She is safe now. Her children are in school. We laughed. We ate. And when I stood up to make a toast, nobody interrupted me. Nobody told me to sit down. Nobody told me I was a curse. If you are listening to this, and you are the one holding your family together while they tear you apart, stop. They tell us that blood is thicker than water. But they forget the full quote. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds you choose are stronger than the ones you are born into. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share a last name. You are allowed to be the villain in their story if it means being the hero in your own. Trust is earned, not owed. And sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to let them fall. My name is Maya. I am not a spare. I am not a jinx. I am free.